Hello, people. How's everybody doing? Let me turn down the light here. It's killing me. How about that? Indirect light? Much better. So, how's everybody doing? Happy Monday. Sativa. But beyond that, you're on your own. Super Silver is good. Talk about Russia. All right. What would you like to know about Russia? All right, I've got I have a new desk set up here, so I'm going to try to get the optimal situation. There's my whiteboard. There's me. Yes, I'm horizontal. Going horizontal. I'm on my iPad today instead of my phone. All right. How's that look? Not bad. Why hasn't Russia attacked us yet? So, I love how the mainstream media was covering the story about the hack. And camera is partially blocked. It is? With what? How could it be? I can see myself. Oh, there it is. Let's see. We'll get this right. How about that? Wrinkly hand. Comey is a Russian agent. So how would we ever know who hacked us? Because our only source of information is people who are professional liars, right? I mean, what exactly is the job description of the CIA? Right? If you take all the romance on it, they're professional liars for the most part. That's sort of what they do. So when professional liars say, trust us, we're not going to show you the evidence, but we totally have a good case here. Now, the media has said that when Trump said these are the same people that told us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, what did the media do? It was the most ridiculous thing. They fact-checked it, sort of. I mean, without actually even looking at the facts. They said, these are probably not the same people who made those decisions, like he meant it literally. So once again, I'm looking for the camera here. Camera is there, okay. So once again, Trump has convinced them to fact check something that clearly is figurative speech. When he says it's the same people, he means it's the same organization. So, and given that the organization is a bunch of people whose job is to mislead and get away with stuff, if you're told something by people whose job it is to mislead, it seems to me all they would have to think is that they had a good reason to do it. You know, if they thought they were acting in a patriotic fashion, how surprised would we be? Drinking stream? You mean drinking alcohol? I don't drink. I am friends with Stefan Pastas, whose comic you should be reading, Pearls Before Swine. Also his line of books, Timmy Failure. Read them all. I mean, that one's for your kids, but. All right, so we need some ideas for Dilbert comics. I was going to write them on the board, but I think I'm going to write them on this little piece of paper instead, except that I don't have a pen. So I'm going to write them on the board, just like I said. No Agenda podcast. I think I've seen it at least once. Birthday lunch. Let's do something that doesn't involve meals or bathrooms. Nothing that involves food, coffee, or bathrooms. I'm doing something on hackers, so that's already in the works. Oh, Dvorak and Curry. Yeah. Wally joins PETA, Red Pill. Well, I'm looking for something that's more office specific. Is anybody in the office right now? If you're at work right now, tell me the last corporate buzzword that someone used on you or that you used. Something you wouldn't use at home. What was the last corporate buzzword? Did you actually use that? Agile process? I've done a lot of agile jokes. Synergy. Supply closet. Yeah, that's true. Stove piping. What is stove piping? Webhook? Blue sky? Implicit bias? Death by tuna oven. Is that a thing? Oh, reach out. Yeah. Not a reach around, it's a reach out. Blue sky. What else? Oh, greenfield. I'll talk about WenHub. At the moment, I got to get some ideas for Dilbert so I can get that stuff down. Touch base, reach out, innovation, artificial, best of breed. Best of breed. Best of breed. Level playing field. Who wants that? Supply chain. That's good. Be the alpha. What's the ETL stack? Robot attorney. That's pretty funny. So, robot attorney gives me an idea for a TV show, series, or a movie. Think how cool this would be. Now, by the way, this is a good example of creativity. If you like writing tips, I'm going to take a little moment to explain this to you. So, your ideal situation, if you're writing humor, is something that's funny before you've actually written the joke. Right? If you can do that, you really have something. Am I looking at you here or am I looking at you here? What? Why is this so confusing? All right, so the camera's over here. So the idea that I thought of when somebody said artificial intelligence or robot for your lawyer is what happens to society when we're at the crossover where the robots are taking over but they're not very good at it. So imagine a movie or a TV show that has a setting that's all about the robots are taking over, but the robots are just really shitty at it. You know, because it's version 1.0, they're still better than people, right? Because people are a pretty low bar, but the running joke would be that the robots just weren't very good either. They were just sort of they were bad in a different way that wasn't as bad as humans. But that would never stop being funny. Wally Trey's hair restoration. I think I did that. I think I did a hair restoration joke once with Wally. But that's worth revisiting. All right, I'm laughing. The reason I'm laughing is because if you've seen the hair restoration commercials, You know that they, at least one of the companies that does it, they have an actual robot that does the hair restoration. So it'll pick like a little hair out of the back of your neck where you have lots of them, and it'll do a little micro implant, and then it just does, quickly does more of them. So there actually are robots that are used for hair restoration. But again, imagine a future world where the robots are doing all that kind of stuff, but they're just really bad at it. So imagine a bad hair restoration robot. It writes itself. How much creative control did I have over the Dilbert cartoon? You mean the one on television? I had as much as I wanted. I was co-executive producer of that. Wally tries to sell company secrets. Trying to sell company secrets. To sell company secrets. So, by the way, I realize I'm jumping back and forth, but one of the stories in the news was about Trump saying he didn't need briefings every single day. Security briefings. And here again, the hilarious part about that is that realistically, he really probably doesn't need them because things don't really change that much every single day, which is hilarious. Oops, who is texting me? Christina. Christina, are you watching me today on Periscope? Yeah, I just made Christina my home screen on my phone. I'm not sure I'll be able to use my apps ever again. Labonians on diversity. Oh, what was I talking about? Trump saying he didn't need briefings every day. So I was trying to imagine what it's like if you're actually the president and you have all these advisors and they want to brief you. Now, it stands to reason, seems to me, that there's the people whose job it is to brief you put a lot of their ego and career and self-importance into being in the room with the president and actually briefing him and doing it every day. So if you didn't have much happening from one day to the next, can you imagine that somebody would say, there's not much going on, just skip my day. Everything's about the same as it was yesterday. Or, because nobody does that, right? Because they're giving up an opportunity to be in the Oval Office briefing the president. And even if you can do that 2 or 3 times a week, if you can do it 7 times a week or 5 times a week, you totally care about that. Like that makes a big, big difference to you. So don't you think, if you're the president of the United States, just think about this from your corporate experience, if you have any, from your business experience. Don't you think that those meetings, although they could be very valuable on any individual meeting, that most of them are a whole bunch of people who need to get in the room with the president in order to continue to be important? All right? So don't you think that they might stretch their briefing a little bit or make it a little bit more interesting, add a new detail, just so they could say, hey, I better get in that room. There's something new happening today. But is it really new? Is it really new in the way that it matters? Is it new and important? Probably not. Probably not. So here again we see Trump calling bullshit on something that is just so ingrained as, logically you just assume that would be important. And he just says, I don't think so. And then you think about it. You put like 1 minute of thought into it, and you realize that it's human beings involved. So if those human beings find it important to get in the room with the president every day for their own career benefits, they're going to find a reason to do that. And they're going to make up shit that the president doesn't need to hear, because that's how they get in the room. By the way, can somebody explain to me why Russia is our adversary? Because if you look through our history, there was that time that we worked on the same team in World War II. That went okay. They haven't attacked our country. We haven't attacked theirs. I mean, obviously there was the Cold War and there was the Cuban Missile Crisis and whatnot, but we haven't attacked. So we don't really have that bad kind of history that should be too hard to get over. And it seems to me that the Russians want peace and prosperity, and they want to defeat ISIS, and we want those things. And sure, they might try to pull one over on us because we're acting too friendly and not pushing back. But you have to ask yourself, why isn't that the case with France or England? Why doesn't England or France try to take advantage of us because we're nice to them, right? It doesn't always work out that if you're nice to your allies, they'll take advantage of you. Although I'm sure, every company is trying to get their own advantage in every way they can, but within reasonable bounds. So, as a thought experiment, and by the way, I'm sure this will be taken out of context, but let me say as clearly as I can, I don't know enough about international relations or Russia or our relationship with Russia to have any kind of an informed opinion that you should put any credibility on. But as a thought experiment and operating with the same level of knowledge that most of you viewers have, let me just put this out there. Why can't we just call them allies and just say, oh, hey, we just decided to call you allies. Now we'll work together. Maybe we can. We're already cutting these enormous oil deals. As you've heard, Exxon's doing enormous deals with Russia. So we have all these business interests. What is the one thing that will keep allies from becoming enemies? What are the two most, if you were to say, what are the two most, let's say three most, valuable things you would want to be true to keep two allies that have a lot of weapons from ever becoming enemies? What would do that? Number one, you're not sharing a border. Very important, right? So you don't ever have a border dispute. So we got that going for us. Number two, you have a personal relationship between leaders who could actually spend a few days hanging out together without the press and have a good time over it. I think Trump and Putin will be close to that model. In other words, that they're likely to become friendly enough. Let's say Tillerson becomes Secretary of State. I don't know if that's going to happen, but he's got a personal relationship with Putin. So how often has a industrialized country gone to war with another industrialized country where the leaders had close relations, would consider each other good guys? Probably, I don't know, I'm not a historian, but I can't think of an example where that's ever happened. And then the last thing is if you have a lot of business deals, right? So if you have a lot of business connections, far less likely you're going to go to war with your own customer, right? So if you look at all the things that cause wars, we don't have them with Russia. And if you look at all the things that prevent wars, we have all of those things. We have the potential for a close relationship of our leaders. We have lots of business dealings and more to come. And it's the more to come that probably makes as much difference. And you don't have a geographic, reason to be angry. Talk about Barron Trump? I haven't seen any news on him. At least nothing incredible. Said the Duke before World War II. Well, so my other advice, this is more of a thought experiment too. This is more of a thought experiment too. I forgot what I was going to say. I got another text from Christina. She's way more interesting than this. USA plus Russia. Oh, yes. I've done that comic a number of times about pushing. I think I've got one in the pipeline right now on that very thing. Ashok begins a startup. I think he's the only one in the group I haven't had create a startup, so probably he needs to do that. Startup. While he rents a nap room on Airbnb. Why can't I seem to get this to look at my face? To fight social media addiction. Yeah, there should be, don't you think there should be some kind of rehab for social media? So here's a sci-fi mind-bending thought. You know how ISIS gives their fighters some kind of drug? I forget what the name of it is. It's not a normal one that we have over here, but apparently it makes them super brave, meaning super stupid, and they don't feel pain, and they're not afraid of anything, and then they can go into war and fight that way. Now they need that because usually if they're fighting against, a major power, they're losing tons of people, so they need it. So in effect, the ISIS fighters are what I would call chemical cyborgs, meaning that they're not really human in the 100% sense. They're enhanced by a drug to do the job of a robot, basically, because robots don't care if they live or die. Humans normally would, but you take the drug, and you take the drug and you don't mind dying. So basically, the drug turns you into essentially a cyborg or a chemical robot. Now, when we send our soldiers over there, they have all this technology that the other side doesn't have, at least not as much of it. So if you see our fighters, they're connected by cell phones and communication, and they're ordering, drone strikes and missiles. Like a single soldier can especially the special ops people can sort of expand their reach into all the other technology and then make it perform. So if you think about it, our soldiers are essentially cyborgs. Now it's not true that the technology is physically attached to their skin, but that's just because it's better, right? If it doesn't need to be attached, why would you want it attached? So you've got your night vision goggles up here, and you could take them off when you don't need them for weight advantages and everything else. And everything else comes off, so you can have the components you like. But it really is mechanical cyborgs, our side, versus chemical cyborgs on the other side. And then, is that really better? Well, I don't know if it's better or worse. I'm just saying that the days of human soldiers fighting is already over. We've already reached a point where normal, like an unfettered human being with, let's say, just a sword or their fists or a rock is no longer fighting. The only people who go to war these days are either chemical cyborgs, ISIS, for example, or mechanical, technological cyborgs like our side. Now, it's true that they can take their stuff off and become civilians anytime they want, but that would kind of be true of a real cyborg too, probably. If you put an enhancement in their brain, the real cyborg could probably take it out. I mean, by the time you got to where you could implant, a cyborg part of a brain into a human being, you're probably also at the point where you could take it out. So everything's removable. We just have a better feature set right now because your phone can just be put on a table anytime you want it. Yeah, so it's already a cyborg battle. Isn't that weird? So here's another thought out of the box. So you see that there's going to be some criticism about Trump's cabinet because it's too many white males. You kind of expected that. And he's making some progress with some diversity there, but not enough. But look what we missed. Look what we missed while we were looking for diversity in the Trump cabinet. His 3 generals. Now, if you think about it, Generals, generals are, by training and disposition, are very pro-veteran. And they're pro, obviously active service military. So while we're slicing and dicing society into all these little parts to say, is each part represented, what about veterans? What about them as a minority group? Why, when we're looking at the diversity in Trump's cabinet, why can't you count generals as part of the representation for veterans? There happens to be veterans of all types, but how is that not a valid segment of society that should be singled out to make sure that they're getting not just what they're owed, but I think society largely thinks they should get more than they're owed because they did more than regular people do. Yeah, exactly? Why are generals not part of diversity? Because I haven't seen veterans being explicitly represented in such a impactful way, I guess. Obama had 3 generals. Did he have 3 generals on the cabinet? Is that the case? I wouldn't know who they were. You should start your own TV channel. I think I might someday. Yes, 3. Oh, yeah, interesting. Same argument holds. Democrats are pro-drone. Yes, they are. Yes, diversity of appearance isn't diversity of thought. That's a good point. Of course, they have different purposes. Diversity of thought is to get a better result. Diversity of race is to try to make it a more happy world. Oh, I just helped you on your dissertation? Well, if you have any other questions on your doctorate or whatever you're working on there, happy to help you. Any more questions or ideas for cited cartoon guy? Porpoising? Clapping for mundane things? Is that what that's called? Porpoising? Is that like a thing? I'd love to know that's a thing because I will use that in a heartbeat if it is. Trump could self-identify as a woman and be the first female president. Oh my God. Well, you know why that's funny? It's funny because it's true. Like, obviously he's not going to do that, but he actually literally, Trump could actually, he should do it on like the last day of office. That's like the funniest thing I've heard in a week. Imagine if the last day of office, Trump is 74 years old, or let's say he gets 2 terms. Let's say Trump gets 2 terms. I don't think that's going to happen, but let's say he does. He's 78 years old, and maybe he doesn't have a lot to live for, but everything's been great. And just before he goes, he does one final Trump-like thing that only he could. He decides to self-identify as a woman and becomes the first female president of the United States. Thank you very much. The only reason I say not 2 terms is because of age. Same compliment for everything employees do. I like that one. Boss uses same compliment. Especially if the same compliment is something like awesome. Failing upwards. To celebrate. Actually, I'm not high at all right now. I wish I were. I'm waiting for a phone call. All right, but I'm going to need to go in a minute here. Would you go to inauguration? It would be hard to say no to it, but I'm not planning to. I mean, if you mean the inauguration, the public event, no. If you meant get invited to the White House, That seems unlikely, but anybody who gets invited to the White House would go, I think. By the way, there's a famous story about Charles Schultz, who got invited to the White House and turned it down. It was a White House dinner of some kind, and he turned it down because he'd already gone once. You know, he'd been to the White House another year, and he was like, you've been to the White House once. he was so nonchalant about it. It was like, it's the White House. Whatever. All right, gotta go. See you folks later. Thanks for all the ideas. I got some pretty good ones here. Let me read them to you so you can see what we produced. We got trying to sell company secrets, which is funny because the company secrets would be so worthless that you couldn't get anything for them. A robot as an attorney, that would be a world where the robots are taking over, but they're doing a terrible job of it. Wally hair restoration robot, same idea. Ashok does a startup. These are some buzzwords: best of breed, reach out, blue sky, green field, supply chain, level playing field, and then rehab for social media. I think I could do something with all those. All right, thank you for the company secrets thing. And your dad's name is Ashok? Is it spelled the same way with an H? It must be, you spelled it that way. Gleaming Russians. Yeah, I've done some Russian stuff already. All right, take care.